leadership team meeting. So a warm welcome to everyone. Can I just remind people when they're speaking to turn their mics on and turn them off when they're not. You don't need to wear, I don't know what the rules are with masks at the moment. You need to wear them when you're wandering around, but not in the chamber. I think that's probably fair enough. And I suppose the main thing is to say that as well, you know, as a council, we're keeping an eye on announcements as they're unfolding. We've noticed that the Prime Minister's instigated Plan B, and we'll be working from home, no doubt, by Monday morning. And really supporting our communities in any way we can. And our message must be to everyone, please, you know, get vaccinated if you haven't been vaccinated already. And if you're eligible for your booster, get a booster jab. I think that's the main thing that everyone can do for themselves and for their communities. Could we please start with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy? And please, if you've got a mobile phone or a computer, can you just make sure that it's not going to ring in the middle of the 72 seconds silence, because that would be very disrespectful. Thank you. Have I got any apologies for absence? Don't believe so. Nope. A declaration of interest? Any declarations of interest? Nope. Minutes of the leadership team meeting held on the 10th of November. Can I sign these as a true and accurate record? You have to say something. Agreed. You read? Thank you. I'll just sign them now quickly. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the proposal for the next phase of the dedicated service. And do you want to talk to this?
Thank you very much, Chair. So this report sets out the plans for changes to the Council's dedicated service for the bereaved and survivors. The changes are directly informed by what we have heard from the bereaved and survivors throughout the consultation and review, which we launched in July of this year. And I'm sure you will join me in saying a big thank you to all of the bereaved and survivors who did engage with this review. And we did get over 230 bereaved and survivors giving quite extensive feedback in phase one. And then there was a second phase where we checked the findings of the first phase, where 30 people participated. And I think what we really tried to do is find different ways of engaging with everyone. So it wasn't just a survey, you know, we had workshops, we called people. We really tried to find a way to speak with them on their terms. So what we've really tried to do here is get a balance. I think there were a lot of bereaved survivors who wanted quite dramatic change, and there were others who were nervous about change. And I would say that not everyone is happy, but I do feel quite confident that we've listened to the findings of the consultation, and we have heard from 40% of those who are accessing the service. So I do want to particularly draw your attention to section 6, where we go through all of the proposed changes. And I think it's important to just think about the fact that needs have changed, and many of the bereaved and survivors are on different stages of their recovery journey. So I think it's absolutely right that we have done this review and looked at what changes are required. We have, one big change is the online solution, which is going to make selections quicker and easier for the bereaved and survivors to access. We've got more targeted support, so particularly with the dedicated workers. Some bereaved and survivors need them less and some need more. So it tries to be more flexible. As I said, bereaved and survivors will have different views about the proposed changes. So it really is about striking a balance and focusing on increasing individual choice and control, and we hope that we can allow people to interact with the service on their terms and in the way that works best for them. So I also did want to draw your attention to Appendix 2, which is how we've summarised the changes to the bereaved and survivors with the "You Said We Did" document. And really that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction, but very much welcome any questions from the leadership team. Thank you.
Questions? Josh and then Jem.
Thank you, Anne, for this. I have a question, perhaps for you, or perhaps I think Callum and Joe are here as well, that be able to do it. It's really good that we focus solely on some of the questions on young people and children, because a big thing that we have, and especially pushing for, is the voice of the child. So I know that we got 35 responses from children and young people to the survey, but just asking kind of what questions we were asking them, how we go about asking them, was it about their education, was it about their access to the dedicated service itself, and just how did we kind of run that process with younger people?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to answer that. In terms of how we asked the question, basically we contacted the children who we are engaging with. So at the time when we launched this section of the review, we didn't have permission from parents to necessarily write and contact all children. So what we did is we made sure that we utilised the same set of questions throughout all of the different interactions we were having with children. So whether they were children who we were supporting through the education team, whether they were children we were supporting through interactions with dedicated service workers. And that's how we got to the kids we managed to get to. In terms of the questions we asked about what was important to them, how they wanted, how they wanted us to work with them, because I think we have often heard from parents and wanted to respect parents' views in terms of their thoughts about how we support children, but we wanted to also hear from the kids themselves. So there was questions about how much access and interaction they wanted from dedicated service workers, who they wanted key points of contact to be, and the range of support they wanted to have available. And most of it did focus on education, but we also heard a lot about their health and well-being and about their aspirations for the future.
Thanks. My question's a little bit around the response rate, which I think is very high for any sort of council engagement session. I suppose my question is just making sure, obviously, with a change that will affect so many people, how are we going to make sure we're also adapting in a positive way for those that didn't respond to the consultation as well?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think, as you say, we are pleased with the response rate, but at the same time we are very keen and eager to make sure that we continue to hear and reach out to the rest of the bereaved survivors who chose not to respond. And I think, considering the context we find ourselves in, that many people decided to complete what was an extensive 25-page survey, we are pleased about. In terms of how we're going to make sure we continue to reach out, what we've done, as Councillor Siren highlighted, we've sent out the "You Said We Will" documentation to all families, all households, and we've now built, through the process of the review, quite a good communication database and communication tool, and we're quite confident that that is now reaching people effectively and consistently, and we're going to be offering that opportunity for ongoing engagement. We've also learned really effectively that people have valued managers being available in places where people live. So as part of the review, we held workshops in estates where we know lots of survivors are living, for example, or in community settings that we know bereavement survivors are comfortable going to. And we held a series of manager-led workshops, and we heard a really good, rich set of feedback through there that we know people will value doing. And lastly, I would say our steering group is an incredibly important part of how we run our service, and we are continuing to commit to refreshing that steering group on an annual basis. So we will soon in the new year be writing out to all bereavement survivors again and giving them the opportunity to join the steering group, again to make sure that we're hearing from as many people as possible in forums that they're comfortable to hear from.
Say something. Can you comment on, you were saying previously that a lot of bereavement survivors think it's a good idea not to use all the funds allocated now, but to try and sort of stretch it a bit. So I assume that means this isn't the last review that you'll be doing, that it's an ongoing iterative process, as that people's points in their journey change, then we change the service to adapt to what their needs will be.
Yeah, exactly, Chair. And I think where we've been, and we've heard this from bereavement survivors the whole time, they want us to make sure that we're being efficient in our service delivery. They're clear that, for them, Grenfell recovery isn't going to end in 2024. There's going to be some major big ticket items still undecided. And so they very much want us to make sure, and we heard it through the survey, and 88% of people really clear that they want us to be putting money aside. What we're expecting is this review will see us through until end of 2022, beginning of 2023, and we will then undertake a further consultation to understand what people want going forwards beyond March 2024 and how they want the service to look. We have been putting money aside. We're through the budget setting process. We're hoping that we'll be able to put more money aside this year. We are unlikely to have the amount of money that we have on an annual basis at the moment, but we should have a decent amount of money for bereavement survivors to be able to shape creatively with us to decide how we continue providing support beyond 24.
That sounds very sensible. And in the meantime, all these prepaid cards and all this new system that's kicking in, and it's kicking in mainly in April, isn't it? So how are you going to make sure that when it kicks in, it actually does what it says on the tin, and you don't have a sort of computer glitch, and you find that people can't access? You're looking at various pilots and things, are you?
Yeah, so we've had the prepaid card system in place now for a year or so. So what we're going to be doing through this review is increasing the amount of choice and control through it. We've got a pilot that's starting in January to look at some of the commission services changes that are set out in the paper, but also we've got a very detailed implementation plan, I would say, in terms of how we're going to make sure we deliver on time all of the commitments we've set out in the You Said We Will document. So it's busy work still to do.
Yeah, because I guess neither you nor bereavement survivors have a template to do anything from. So you're not making up as you go along. Sounds a bit sort of not very polite, but you're creating the service and changing it as you go along, which is a great thing.
Yeah, we're definitely making sure that we are learning from wherever we can learn, but the Grenfell situation is unique and different from other disasters. So there are things we've managed to take from other disaster contexts, and we're always still looking and researching and taking what we can from other places. But most importantly, our commitment is to place bereavement survivors at the centre of our decision making, and we will continue to work with them to shape the service as it develops.
Excellent, thank you. Kim.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So first of all, just to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into this. 6.14, obviously, and we've heard about this before, about increasing choice and control, and I just wondered if you could just run through the pre-approval process of the services that's referred to in 6.4. How do you pre-approve them?
Of course. Thank you, Councillor. So we've had individual services as part of the offer within the dedicated service since it launched in 2019. And so what we have seen is we know what we've got 2 years of data basically on what bereavement survivors have wanted to use their individual services for, although it's highly personalised. And what we're looking to do is to create from that learning and from what we know people have asked for and that we've been able to approve under our commissioning policy, we're trying to make a system that allows people not to have to come and ask for things that we have spent 2 years agreeing, and instead to have an online solution that they'll be able to look at and essentially be able to choose one of a multitude of different options that don't then require the back and forth with our system. It is more streamlined in terms of freeing up staff time to deliver on some of the other commitments that we've put in the process, but most importantly for them, we hope it will make bereaved survivors' interface with our provision feel more empowering.
Okay, Mo, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, just a reminder, I have mentioned this before. I think if we are going to review this, and by the way, thanks for the email you've sent me, the details after the council meeting of employment and training. In my view, training and retraining and employing, finding jobs for the survivors is a key. Moving people back to work, this is the best therapy anyone could provide, and monitoring them, supporting them for a year, up to a year after the employment. They feel they are not alone. I think we need to focus on that. This is the best way forward for them. And I have seen a number, I remember £30,000 for training. If it's training the entire group, I think it's a little number. Could you tell me what this 30,000 was spent on? Because to train tens of people, you need more money to train them a new skill, a new job, even university. And I do remember after the first council meeting after the disaster, we've passed a motion specifically for children, for the bereaved and the survivors. And I would like to know what happened to this. Are we still helping them all the way through university and after university? Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, I'm sure many people would share your views that employment and training is very important, but we have to remember that these services are co-designed by the bereaved and survivors, so they choose what they feel that they want to have commissioned, and that's absolutely right, that it's their decision, not ours. But I hand you over to Callum to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for that question. I think in terms of employment, as the Chair was saying, it is important to see. We know from our work with bereavement survivors that a number of families are interested in getting back to work. A number of them have told us they're interested in getting back to work in the future, but some of them, they aren't quite ready, and some of them, in truth, weren't working before the fire, and it's not a priority of theirs right now. So what we try and do through the support planning process is to ensure that we are able to provide the personalised support that's right to people. But employment and skills is one of our 5 core areas of focus. So I completely agree with you. For a number of people we support, it's an important tool in them recovering, rebalancing and readjusting, if you like. In terms of the support that's available, it's quite varied. So I think we have set aside specific contracts to support people from thinking about how they might want to get back into work, but we have got a bigger employment fund than I think you might have interpreted from our paper. So we've had an offer in place since 2020 that there's money set aside for every bereaved survivor to access a training course of their choice, which is in addition to their individual services. And if everyone was to utilise it, in addition, it would be closer to £100,000. The £30,000 is based on those people who have used it to date. And in addition to that, we have had the support of the wider COVID-19 Recovery Fund, and so there is wider money available for those people who've been doubly impacted by Grenfell and COVID. In terms of the educational support, I can completely agree. Education is an incredibly important part of what bereaved survivors want for their children, and we are very committed to ensuring that bereaved survivors' children are able to continue to thrive and their lives aren't defined by their experience through Grenfell, and obviously having a positive educational experience is an important part in that process. That's why we work hand in glove with the Education Department, with schools, to try and make sure that they're making reasonable adjustments for these children, and so that the children are able to manage their trauma and still be able to thrive in normal school settings. But in addition, it's also why within the dedicated service we have a Education Department that the steering group asked us to bring in back in 2019, because it wasn't a core part at the beginning. And that means we have specific primary school support, secondary school support, and following our OSC meeting last month, we are now very close to launching a specific offer for children who are in Year 6 going into Year 7 and who are in Year 11 and Year 13 for a additional tuition support based on your helpful challenge a few meetings ago. So we're hopeful that that will launch in January and will be in place for the 3 years going forward. So all children who are getting to those key stages in their lives will know that that support is available and won't have to come asking for it. It will be a proactive offer. So thank you for your support in challenging us on that area.
Thank you. Mary Shraz, anything from you?
Yeah, concern was expressed in OSC, and also we had a joint meeting with the Audit Committee, and they put this down as a risk. Concern about what is going to happen in March 2024. I know you're squirreling money away, but we know that the timetables have slipped. And I think the idea is if people have got used to having a dedicated worker and that would suddenly stop at, you know, a difficult time, that could cause real problems. So that was brought up in both of those meetings.
Thank you. I think, as Callum said, what we're trying to do is make the money stretch further so that there won't be exactly what you referred to, a sort of cliff edge, and that suddenly people will disappear. But Callum, I think you've explained it already, but do you want to comment on that further?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think it is an important challenge. We work with families, and what we've seen is that since 2017, a number of families have made progress, and as I think one of the other councillors said, don't need the same level of support from us now. One of our aims is to try and ensure that people are able to live and be without the support that we provide, because eventually the support we provide won't be there. But I do agree there is a risk that for some families, considering the timelines of the inquiry and the tower, they won't quite be at that stage. We're doing everything we can to make sure that there is support in place, and also looking across the council to make sure that wider council services will also be ready to be able to support families who need that additional support at that time. But I think it's definitely something to keep under review.
Thank you. Can we all agree then the recommendations which are, let me go back, in paragraph 2? Yes? Agreed. Thank you very much. Could we now then please turn to the next report, which is paper A5, appropriation of dwellings between the general fund and the housing revenue account, which I think is quite a short technical report. Kim, do you want to introduce it? But I don't think it's very
again, a very short introduction, just confirming what you said. It is a technical report. It's to do with an agreement that we had with MHCLG on the limit of the number of socially rented homes we'd have in general fund. And we've all gone over that amount. These were homes that were bought following the Grenfell tragedy, and the proposal is to transfer some of those homes into the housing revenue account in order to not breach the agreement.
Thank you. Josh.
Thank you, Kim. A quick question. It says in the report there are 33 properties from the general fund to go in the HRA. My question is, what type of properties are they? Are they detached houses? Are they flats? Are they based all around the borough? Kind of what's a bit of a flavour from what we're proposing to do here?
Dan?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we've deliberately chosen, these are the homes of that wider cohort of homes that we acquired. These are the ones that are on our existing estates. So homes where we own the unencumbered freehold already and where the transfer is therefore the least complicated. So that means, kind of in terms of answering your direct question, they are mostly flats and all on our existing estates where we own the freehold, and that's how we've chosen this 33.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this one? No, none from the leadership team. As I said, it's quite a short technical report. Mo, anything from you? No? Mary-Therese? No? Okay, could we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2 then, please? Agreed. Thank you. Right, the next paper is paper A6, which is the Violence Against Women and Girls Strategy. Emma, over to you. Oh, you need to turn your mic on.
That would help. Thank you. Sadly, colleagues will be very well aware that violence against women and girls is not a new problem. And in fact, as a council, we have been working with some fantastic partners to tackle this for many years. But the reality remains that 2 women are killed in this country every week by former or current partners. And we believe at least a third of women in this borough have been have also had subjected to some kind of sexual violence. Depressingly, during COVID, our numbers have gone up for domestic violence at a time when other forms of crime have been falling. So I think that this report is very timely. I think there is a real spotlight on this subject at the moment. We know the Mayor's Office will be publishing their own report next year on this subject. So I'm very pleased that we are publishing our new 5-year strategy here. I think what's new about this is that it really is based on the consultation, the work we've done talking to survivors. Because unless we can persuade more victims to talk to us, to come forward, and we can provide the right support, we cannot end this problem. Shabana is our by-borough lead on violence against women and girls, and is happy here and happy to answer more questions along with Stuart. But I would like to draw your attention to the full outcomes on page 92, and also to say that we will be publishing an action plan that follows on from this 5-year strategy in the new year. And I shall stop there.
That was going to be my questions, when you're publishing an action plan.
Early next year, well, perhaps colleagues would, officers like to.
Hi there. Yes, so the strategy is quite high level, and the action plan is going to really pick up some of that granular detail, and it's something which we very much want to develop, as we did with the strategy, with partners, highlighting that it's a shared priority. So the plan is that this work has already been undertaken, but we will be looking to have a new action plan early next year that will be complementing the strategy itself.
Thank you. Any other question? Jem, and then Catherine.
Thank you. My question is around page 90, which is sort of the local picture. I do appreciate, obviously, a lot of this crime is clearly unreported or sort of unnoticed, hidden in plain sight. But some of the figures are clearly very startling. And I was just wondering, especially around FGM, where we're sort of saying 1,600 women in the borough would have suffered from that. Are we doing our own research into this? Are we working with local partners to understand which particular communities or which areas of the borough best to focus on, and also sort of how we will work with public health as well to make sure that there's joined up thinking there? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you rightly said, the data, this is a hidden topic. The more we talk about it, the more we raise awareness, and as Councillor Emma Wills has said, the more hopefully people will come forward. So this is very much the tip of the iceberg, and the data is a mixture of what we know locally, but also based on national research and estimates from that. So the data related to FGM is based on national statistics that we've localised. However, we're really keen to find more information and understand the picture better. And a key way of doing that is speaking directly with specialist services that we commission that work on the ground and have that relationship with residents and with survivors. And so you can see from page 19, we've also included data that they themselves capture. But we also want to include data and information from survivors themselves. And so as part of the development of this strategy, we've been consulting extensively with survivors from a range of different backgrounds, because we know that no one journey is the same and every survivor has a unique experience. So we've got to ensure that our strategy covers all of that. And going forward, how we both capture data, which is both qualitative and quantitative, because we need to get that balance right, but then how we use that data, how that informs our campaigns, our action plans, our policy, is very much a priority. It's referenced in the strategy, and it'll be picked up in the action plan, because unless we know what the need is, we're not going to be able to respond. So yeah, thank you for your question, an important one.
Before I turn to Catherine, I just want to follow up on that. So do you still have projects at St Mary's or Chelsea and Westminster in the maternity unit? So you're getting data from there?
Yes, exactly. So as part of our response to VOG, we work very much in a partnership. So we have a strategic board, which you can see in our governance structure, and that's attended by health colleagues as well as adult safeguarding, children's, etc. And all of these partners hold a piece of the puzzle and bring that together at the VOG board to help build that picture of need. We also, off the back of that, have an operational group which focuses specifically on understanding and responding to harmful practices, of which FGM is a feature. So as a result of that data and the conversations, we've created dedicated spaces to have those conversations on a more operational level. But absolutely working with partners and understanding what they know and how they can share it with us is a priority.
Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's an excellent strategy. So I've got two questions. One is, because you've done this new consultation talking to survivors, if you could maybe bring to light some of the differences and some of the different actions that you've taken from them that will mean the strategy is different from the last strategy. And the second question is, obviously this includes violence against men and boys too. And so how many of the people that you consulted with were actually men and boys, and what sort of numbers are there that are being affected by this as well?
Thank you. So as I was intently listening to your second question, I forgot your first one.
Oh, so the first one was just because of you'd done the consultation in a different way.
Different?
If you could highlight some of the different actions in this strategy from the previous one that had come to light because of the way you'd put it together.
Absolutely. So I think what's been really interesting and what's changed since we launched the first strategy is definitely the onus that's been placed on holding abusers to account. What we heard really strongly from survivors is, you know, it shouldn't be up to me to stop the abuse. I can only do so much. I'm being controlled and abused by somebody who's often missing from the picture. And so how can we shift that focus so that instead of telling victims to, you know, in theory, stop being abused, and actually move away and say to abusers, this isn't acceptable and this must stop. And so that's really been something which we've highlighted more in this strategy because it's what survivors have said, but it's also where the national conversation is going in light of some of the tragic murders I'm sure you're aware of. And so you can see that priority 4 is very much about holding abusers to account. And importantly, that's not just within the criminal justice system. Of course, that's an important element, and we need to make sure our courts are robust. But holding abusers to account is something we can all do, both as professionals, but also as colleagues, as neighbours, as friends. And so that's something which we've really highlighted. The other thing which I think is slightly different with this strategy is we understand that from survivors that what they often say to us is before they even go to professionals to seek support, they speak to their friends and family and they speak to close ones. So what we really want to do in this strategy is what we call our coordinated community response and our ecological model. The diagrams are in the strategy, which sort of set out what role do we all play in ending violence against women and girls. So if you're concerned about a friend or a family member or a neighbour, what role do you play? And what we're trying to do is shift the way in which violence against women and girls can be a taboo, can be a hidden, and get the conversation going. And so that's very much the emphasis of the strategy, that wider coordinated community response. So that's some of the key challenges that come to mind as in light of your question. And I know I'm going to forget the second one you just... Men and boys, thank you, yes. So we have within the strategy, apologies, this isn't the final design, we will have a video embedded which clearly explains how this strategy is for everyone, not just men and boys, but those who are non-binary as well. We sort of highlight that the reason the term violence against women and girls is used is because that reflects the disproportionality of the types of abuses highlighted. It's also in line with the United Nations approach, the national government approach, and as Emma has also referenced, the new MOPAC strategy as well. And so the strategy, although it says violence against women and girls, what we've tried to make quite clear is this is for everybody. Having said that, what we know is that people, depending on their experiences, access support differently. And so we need to have a gendered understanding of the issue so that we can develop services and support that meets the needs of people in their unique way. A key part of this strategy as well, although it's very much focused on our local approach, it's how we adopt more of a pan-London approach as well. So we're working quite closely with MOPAC, London councils, to make sure that we're more broadly meeting the needs of all survivors and residents. So absolutely, this strategy is for everyone. The term can, I understandably, be seen as exclusive, but that's just to reflect that disproportionality.
Thank you. Oh, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for bringing this strategy, and I agree it completely needs to be a focus, particularly because, well, I mean, it's quite an alarming number of our residents who are affected by this. And often residents don't have the resources to remove themselves from the dangerous situation. And I guess my question really relates to Section 8, where we talk about support with other parts of the council, particularly housing, and it really just struck me because I guess if a woman, say, presents having escaped a dangerous situation, particularly with children, what are our commitments with housing? Because I do have a resident in my ward who actually very distressed, obviously, as you can imagine, put in temporary accommodation, and that's a long way from where she lives and where her children go to school. So I think we just have to think about the real examples of what these individuals and mothers go through when they leave a dangerous situation. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
And Shabana, it'd be really helpful if you could actually specifically say it would be really helpful what our council policy is in regard to this and housing women who've been the victims of domestic violence.
I think Dan also may need to come
exactly,
in, because you'll know where they are.
Well, between you, if you can answer that question, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, I was going to say it'd be great to get some support from housing colleagues because it's quite a specific housing question. But you're absolutely right. One of the concerns that we see across the country, not just locally, is around refuge and support for women who are fleeing abuse. We do locally commission refuge provision, and also, really importantly, as part of the new Domestic Abuse Act, which passed only this year, there's a real emphasis on safe accommodation, and there's additional duties that are applied on local authorities to see victims of domestic abuse as a priority so that they can be housed and they can be safe. We also, in terms of policies, we also have the sanctuary scheme, so that when it's safe for someone to stay in their home, what measures can be added to ensure that safety, so things like additional locks, CCTV, for example. The point around moving borough, I do want to come to that because it's a really important one. Sadly, what we know with domestic abuse is that sometimes it is safe to move borough, simply because abuse doesn't stop post-separation. We know it can continue, and often victims tell us of being stalked or feeling that they were being watched. And in those instances, it's important that it's clearly conveyed and a partnership approach is taken with survivors to explain why it may be safer. However, with the new Domestic Abuse Act, and we're yet to kind of see this come into fruition as it's quite new, one of the positives is, again, shifting that narrative. So why should victims who've experienced abuse be the ones who uproot their lives and move? Should it not be the abuser? And so new duties are being applied to police to very much focus on removing abusers from the household as opposed to removing victims. So that's a mixture of what we're doing locally, but also some great changes happening nationally that, again, this strategy and the accompanying action plan will look to implement.
Thank you. And Dan, where do people who've suffered violence, where are they on the housing list, the register?
So there's kind of two-part answer to that question. So the first part is about the kind of homelessness duty that we owe. So the law has actually recently changed to require all local authorities to kind of intervene more directly and quickly with people fleeing domestic abuse. So we are changing the way that we approach this to make sure that we're not just meeting that new requirement, but kind of meeting the spirit of it, if you like, in the way that we accept a duty of homelessness towards someone fleeing domestic abuse. But of course, as you say, the real question is about how quickly we can move to get them into a settled home. And actually, we're right now consulting on a revision to our allocations scheme, which explicitly includes the question, which we're asking consultees about, where in the priority list people fleeing domestic abuse should be. So it's very much a live issue. We don't have a settled position on it, but there's an opportunity right in front of us, as it were, to show a level of priority to that, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And if there aren't any other questions from the leadership team, no, is there anything from the Labour group? No. Marisha, is anything from OSC?
Yeah, just to say, this has come to OSC, and I would like to thank Shabana for an excellent strategy. I think it's really good. Thank you.
Good. Can we agree the recommendation then, please, in paragraph 2? Yes, agreed. Thank you very much. And then the next paper, which gets all through the strategy, is... Sorry, I can't find it. Here we go. A8, is that right? A7. It is the Safeguarding Adults Executive Board Annual Report, and I know that we've got Eileen Buckton here, so I wonder whether you'd like to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to be able to present the report tonight. What I would particularly like to focus on is to thank the Council, actually not only for compiling the annual report and pulling together the kind of responses from across the partnership, but for giving the kind of leadership during the COVID period. We underwent some very great changes, really, in how we approach safeguarding, because our usual ways of alerts being kind of raised for us, our ways of kind of responding, had to change quite dramatically during that period. So this report does reflect on the kind of priorities that we've followed over the last 2 years, and we maintained those priorities and maintained business as usual, but delivered in a different kind of way. But we also had a particular focus on assuring ourselves as a partnership board of how we could look at safeguarding issues that had been raised and had changed during the kind of COVID period. And I think that the Council and partners worked together in a way that was really exemplary. And I hope that that comes across in the annual report of the kind of strength of the partnership working and the contributions from different partners across the borough. And I really feel that during this year, the strength of those partnerships has remained, and we have been able to kind of build upon it and begin to look at safeguarding in different ways. And I think we've learned a great deal and reflected a great deal on what were some of the gains of working during that period and having to work in very different ways. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have about the detail of the report, but that's just some kind of general comments of what it has been like to focus on safeguarding during this period.
Thank you. And I mean, it's great that we do have such a strong partnership model, and that some good's come out of COVID, and there's, you know, looking at new ways of working, as you said. And I, for one, thought it was a very comprehensive report and really well laid out. So I don't have any questions, but Jem.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank Aileen for pulling this all together. It was obviously the year of 2020, 2021 was the year safeguarding became the national objective. We spent the entire year looking out for our most vulnerable people, and the residents of Kensington and Chelsea were no different. It's not surprising at all that we saw a near 40% increase in the number of sort of resident engagement referrals to the services. Thankfully, they didn't really result in an increased number of Section 42s, but what they are showing is that our residents are out there, and they're much more alert of what issues that they do need to report to us, and make sure that we can catch things very early on, so that issues such as hoarding and other similar things can be picked up right at the beginning, and the same goes for our counsellors as well. I think there's been a really good deep dive of tracking exactly the number of referrals that have come through the counsellors. We obviously have a really good understanding of where our ASC users are, and we're able to sort of compare which wards are referring in line with their populations, and there's a few that I think we do need to do a little bit more deep diving into, whereas others are sort of generating 45% of the referrals with only 6% of the users. So once again, just really to thank you. As the report says, it's safeguarding everybody's business, and I think you've really shown and demonstrated that within this report. So thank you.
Are there any questions? Josh?
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's a really good report as well. It was really great to see. I guess one of my questions was, what have we learnt from the lockdown and the COVID period in regards to helping adult safeguarding? Because obviously what we did in Children's Services, we kind of did a complete review of our strategies. We teamed up obviously with our safeguarding partnership and working closely with schools, NHS and police, etc., in order to kind of ensure that children who are in care or who may be victims of abuse have proper attention from our Children's Services. How have adults done a similar thing? Have they done a similar thing? What have we learned from COVID, basically?
Eileen, do you want to answer that, or Jan? Eileen.
We did undertake a fairly similar review to Children's Services, but perhaps with a different kind of focus. So, for example, one of the things that we looked at was to look closely at the situation in care homes, which hadn't been a kind of priority for us in the previous year, but obviously because of the feedback that we were getting from families and concerns from care home managers, we worked very closely with kind of commissioners and did a review of that kind of particular aspect of adult safeguarding. That's just kind of one example. I would say that overall, that what we learnt was to have a far greater focus on prevention. And I think, as was just being kind of said earlier, we did have an increase in referrals. They didn't go through to full-blown safeguarding inquiries, but what it showed to us was there was a great deal of concern from neighbours, from families, of people coming forward to say, we are concerned about a relative, or we're concerned about the man who lives down the road, or we haven't seen this person kind of go out shopping. There was a real level of kind of awareness. And I think for us as a board, we have reviewed our kind of partnership approach to preventative work. So, for example, we are working with mental health services to look at what services are available that we can make sure that people can avail themselves of in ways that they perhaps need to do differently because they don't go to the same sort of places. They've been kind of behind closed doors, and we may be going into a period of that again, but where we can make sure that people are aware of where they need to get help from and what is available for them. So we did quite a lot of reviews of what services were available on the ground and how we might deliver them differently. So I think there were some parallels and I think some quite good thinking about how we might work with families and think family that kind of works across both children and adults.
Thank you. Emma.
It's probably not a question you can answer here. And by the way, I love this report, and I love the way the survivor comments. I think it's really laid up really well. One of the things that I found in my own ward, particularly one block I'm thinking in particular, in the last year we've had a couple of incidents where residents have repeatedly called, particularly the police, who perhaps are their first port of call, about concerns about somebody clearly with mental health problems, and they just say nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. And actually one of these people actually set his room on fire and caused a fire, and everybody was evacuated. So I just wondered, is there sometimes a disconnect between what, this, which is a sort of, an important piece of work, but actually what we're able to achieve on the ground in preventing the harm happening?
Who wants to answer that? Eileen?
I could just add that you might be aware that we have recently set up a mental health forum, which is pulling together all the partners across the borough, the CCG, the police, GPs, PCNs, as well as a safeguarding board. And the intention of that is to make sure that those sorts of things don't happen again. But obviously, perhaps Aileen has more to say.
I think it's a really important question. And one that we've given a lot of consideration to, because we did get a lot of referrals like that. And obviously one of the things that we have to be very careful about is to protect people's data and confidentiality. So sometimes we're not able to go back to a neighbour in the street and explain exactly what happened, which doesn't mean to say that there hasn't been action of some kind. There may well have been, but I think we need to explain to people the process that we're undertaking, so that if they have made a referral, they've got some sense about how, the process that we're going to go through to ensure that their referral hasn't been lost and that we are kind of giving it due consideration. I also think that we shouldn't be complacent as well, that we actually need to kind of check all our referrals very thoroughly to make sure that they are responded to. We are currently in this year undertaking some mystery shopping so that we can assure ourselves that that does happen. So I think it's a combination of being clear to referrals that we may not be able to share with you the detail of what's happened, but also to make sure that for any referrals that do come forward, that all of them have been considered and that they have been kind of signed off in the most appropriate way. And it's one of the things in terms of our quality assurance programme that we're very much focused upon this year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the Barry?
It's not a question, it's just in the absence of Sarah Newman, because we discussed earlier at our management group what the implications were of the inquiry into, and I know this is about child, but the inquiry into Arthur Lobinjo Hughes and his death his murder in Solihull, and the announcement by the Secretary of State for a national inquiry into that. And Sarah was describing the issues about the practice management when there was working from home. And I'm just mindful that what we need to make sure of, and I think that Sarah was talking to us about the approaches that were being adopted across London, practice guidance that was given out by National Children's Social Work. And this may have some bearing on social work practice in adults. And it really is about the level of contact between, and I'm sure this will be an issue that we covered in the inquiry, the extent to which this appalling murder was not, the lead up to this was not noticed, or may not have been noticed as much because of the working arrangements. And I think that it's something that we need to be absolutely alert to and focused on. I know that Sarah is, and if she was here, she will be giving examples of what they were doing and how they were doing it. And I just feel that the council ought to know about that. So I'll ask Sarah to do that.
I think that's really necessary, especially as we're now from Monday going to be working from home again. So it's really important for both children and adults that we know what the risks are and how to, alleviate them. No? Anything from you? No? No, Traz? No? Okay, I think it just behoves me to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming tonight, for bothering to come out on a freezing cold night and be here, and for presenting this report, which is so clear and so comprehensive. And, gives us the assurance that we're providing I wouldn't say, it's a bit worrying to say good service, but solid service, and that we hope that we continue to do so over the next year with all the challenges that it brings. But thank you so much for coming. Are there recommendations? Yes. Can we approve the recommendations in paragraph 2? Yes, agreed. Thank you. And now we're on to modern slavery, I think. But it's Emma's going to introduce.
So this is a bit of a double act between myself and Mary, and hopefully I will explain why. So we have, in April, you will recall that we published our 5-year modern slavery strategy, which is about how we tackle the whole panoply of modern slavery in the borough. And that is a 5-year strategy, as I say. However, this paper, which before you tonight, is our second annual modern slavery statement. So this is something we don't have to do, but we do. And this is very much about what we do internally as a council to stop modern slavery. And Charlotte, who's our lead on modern slavery, is with us. But I'm going to briefly pass over to Mary just to see if she wants to say anything about this specific paper.
Well, I was going to ask Mary.
So really just, I mean, the second part of the paper, which is our statement, is shows what we've done and what we plan to do. And as you know, we've got a new procurement strategy in the council, and tackling modern slavery is part and parcel of that. And it gives us more capacity to know what's going on, to check what's going on in our supply chain. And you'll see from the actions that that's very much at the heart of this. It's worth noting that it is a very hidden crime, and it's worth noting that there's an estimate that there were 56 incidents in 2020 in this borough alone. And really, I find that very shocking, and I think it's a very good reminder that we as an organisation need to be vigilant and also very much encourage our partners to be so too.
There's a theme, isn't there, throughout the last 3 papers of everyone being vigilant, that it's everybody's business, that you need to check and you need to speak out, really, isn't it? All 3. Are there any questions on this? I thought it was a very straightforward, good paper. Mo, anything from you?
I have a comment about this. Well, as you may know, that the Home Office, this is specifically for asylum seekers, the Home Office sometimes takes up to 2 years, which is much, much better than before, to make a decision on an application, between 1 to 2 years. And while the asylum seeker waiting for this decision, they are only provided with accommodation and food. So this is a long time, and this is a way of forcing them to go working for £5 an hour or less, just to buy the essentials, other things they need, to buy a mobile phone, working 2-3 months to pay for a mobile phone. We need to address this. This is something national. It's not out of our hand, but this problem is there.
Thank you, Mo. Marie-Therese?
Yeah, just a comment really that I think it would help to work with licensing on this. I think if the council work with licensing, because sometimes when you're I don't know, licensing massage parlours or nail bars and things like that, you do have quite a high degree of suspicion of what might be going on there. So I think we could tie up with licensing a bit more.
Thank you. I thought this was about procurement, though, so hopefully we're not procuring
just about us. Okay.
It's about
well, I suppose it's about our internal practice. Maybe Charlotte would like, I think we do, but perhaps Charlotte, you'd like to comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Absolutely, licensing is an important part of thinking about our general response to modern slavery. The licensing team are booked in for some training in 2022. There has been some previous work done with licensing around those vulnerable areas that we're aware of, like nail bars, like you mentioned, and massage parlours, special treatment facilities, and locations. We'll continue to do that, and we need to bring in all of the partners across the borough, because we have lots of different enforcement powers that we can be using to try and disrupt modern slavery, so we will continue to consider that. Thank you.
Interesting. So this isn't just about the services that we procure, this is about everything.
So the modern slavery statement is predominantly about our supply chains, and it should be focused on how we mitigate the risk of modern slavery in our supply chains. However, the statement does include some more holistic information about how we're responding as a council and how we're taking ethical leadership around modern slavery.
Great, thank you. Therefore, thank you very much for that question, Marie-Therese. Would any other questions? No? Can we approve the recommendation in paragraph 2? Great, thank you. And the next paper is the budget and capital programme, and fees and charges and capital programme. Mary.
Yes, if I can just introduce this. So this is rather a sort of hybrid paper. So the main emphasis of it is on fees and charges. As you know, we published a fees and charges strategy in March 20, which I think helps us to, in our approach to levying fees and charges. In fact, I know it does. You'll note that bullet point 2 and 1.5, talks about how charging and income generated should contribute towards our priorities, and that's absolutely right. It is a significant part of our income. On the other hand, we don't want to overcharge our hard-pressed residents. So it's a balancing act. We try and review them annually. Obviously, with the smaller charges, that's not appropriate because you get, proportions of pence involved. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be reviewed and changed, say, every 2 or 3 years rather than 1 year. So this report in Annex B is exception reporting, shows you where we think it shouldn't be the general 2% rate, but either higher or lower. So I'd welcome any comments on that. And the second part of the paper, from paragraph 5 onwards, just describes some changes which I think are fairly uncontroversial to the capital programme, which also need approval. And I'm sure Tara will answer any difficult questions.
Thank you. Johnny.
Thank you, Mary. I really just wanted to make a comment and to draw out something in the fees and charges report, particularly at 5.1.2. We know there was a very high-profile planning committee meeting recently in relation to South Kensington Station, and although the committee resolved not to grant permission, I think it was clear that everybody in this council and across the borough wants to see step-free at all of our stations. And so I particularly welcome the commitment in our pipeline right here for £7.5 million, a significant contribution towards step-free. We know that TfL are consulting on step-free access right now, and that one of the things I'm sure they'll be looking at is whether there's external funding available to bring forward schemes, particularly at complex and high-profile destinations like South Kensington. We have more visitors to South Ken than just about anywhere in the country. Every day we have more people than come to Terminal 5 at our airports. It's a great destination, and this is also an agenda that unites our resident associations, the Exhibition Road Cultural Group, and some of the world-class museums and universities that are in that area, and also our businesses and landowners like South Kensington Estates. So that's something that I wanted to draw attention to and to say that I think it's a fantastic move to include it in the capital pipeline.
Can I say I agree? Anyone else? I know you've all looked at the fees and charges within your own sections, but anyway, Kim.
Sorry, just two questions. Sorry. Two quick questions. I was going to just have one, but something else I've just read. I just wondered, do you benchmark the level of fees with other boroughs in terms of working out the overall assessment of where the charge is? And then my second question, which I was just surprised which I read, is that we give a discount for antique dealers. I just wondered that we're freezing the antique dealer discount on the basis of the impact of their business. I wondered if there are other businesses that we give discounts to, or is it just antique dealers we're benevolent towards?
Tara?
Good.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Councillor, for that question. Yes, in terms of benchmarking, we do. As Mary said, the charging strategy was introduced in March 2020, and what we want to do is go through every fee and charge it and look at where we are against the principles that are in that strategy. And part of that, one of the key questions we'll be asking is, one, for other authorities that charge for that service, what are the levels of charge that they impose, and we'll be comparing ourselves to that. So that is absolutely part of that work. We're also taking part, obviously fees and charges are a key source of income, not just for Kensington, most other local authorities, certainly in London. They're also part of a Pan-London exercise where we are sharing some of that expertise. I think not just in terms of the fees and charges that the level of fees and charges, but also what we charge for as well and how we compare to others. In terms of the second question, I might have to come back to you on whether we offer any other discounts apart from antique dealers. Nothing jumps to mind, but I have to say with the level, actually, I mean, obviously we're only looking at Annex B here, but Annex A had the full list, so really good question. I'll take that one away and we'll have a look to see whether there's any others just to flag to you.
Thanks. I say that's a very good question. It's me jollily saying you've all reviewed them in your areas, and then you managed to winkle out one that people don't know about. So thank you for that, Kim. Anything from you, Mo, from the Labour Party on this? No? And Managers? No? Okay, so can we agree the recommendations, which is to review the proposed fees and charges in Annex A, Annex B, agree for the proposed fees and charges to be launched for consultation for Annex A, and agree for the proposed changes to the capital programme set out in Section 5 to be included in the budget consultation process that's currently underway. Yes, do we all agree with those? Thank you very much. Could we then turn to A11, which is the A10. Sorry, it's not, I haven't got them in colours this time. Here we go, A10, the revenue and capital monitoring position. Gosh, latest position at the end of September. Mary?
Shall I just introduce it, and again, I hope for support from Taryn. This is actually reasonably good news. Our position has improved, and actually, in a way, the underlying reasons for that improvement are even more encouraging, and that's a recovery in our incomes and a recovery in income from activity within the economy. There are some details in this paper about other pressures that we've had on our budget over the year, but we've seemed to have weathered. And at the moment, the gap is 1.2 million looking like at the end of the year, which is not nearly as bad as we thought it might be, and indeed may well improve further. There's also some paragraphs about further capital slippage this year, which obviously is not good news, although our financing costs will go down, but that's not what we plan to do. It's not what we're delivering. But again, COVID has played its part in that. And Taryn may want to add some pertinent detail to that.
Taryn?
So I suspect the only thing to add is, so we are only halfway through the year at this stage, and I suppose if you'd asked me a month ago, I'd be saying that this time last year the position did even improve in the second half. Obviously we are entering, and even more after today's announcement, quite a period of uncertainty over the next few months. So I think it's still quite a volatile position that we just need to keep an eye on, but you know, a relatively good position to be in at this part of the year. But we're going to keep a very close eye, not just on the impact of the pandemic over the next few months, but also economic conditions, particularly inflation rates and interest rates, not only on the current year, but with my other hat on, we're also planning next year's budget as well, so looking at the impact on that as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Taryn or for Mary? None.
Can I ask a really stupid question? Ever the optimist here. If, in fact, the outturn for this year continues in this vein and is better than we had originally hoped, does that mean the slight black hole we were looking at in previous years? Well, there'll still be a hole, perhaps not quite as black.
Yeah, so it does in theory. I suppose what I would remind everybody is, so obviously back in 2021 the pressures from COVID were much more significant than what we're reporting in the current year. We did benefit quite significantly from government grant and income compensation scheme. What you're seeing here is actually there is still a pressure of just over 10 million. It is down to government grant and that income compensation scheme that is putting us in the position that we are. So yes, perhaps the black hole may have disappeared for the current year, but I think we shouldn't be under any illusion of what does any long-term impact look like from COVID, and then with the absence of any government grant, what does that mean for the local authority? So as you say, I would always, the optimist, but always obviously flag the risks as well.
Perhaps just a realist. Okay, if there are no other questions from the leadership team, I'll ask Mo. Any comments? Or Marie-Therese?
Just to say that the budget working group is looking at this in detail and to say thank you to Mary and Taryn and other lead members who have come to talk to us. So thank you.
Thank you. There's a whole host of recommendations in paragraph 2, so I'm not going to read them out because we'll be here for many, many hours to come. So, but do we all agree them? Can you please read them and agree them? Yes, agreed? Thank you very much. And then the final paper this evening, unless there's another one tucked away that I haven't seen, is the annual Treasury Strategy mid-year review. Mary.
Again, this is quite a straightforward paper, looking at essentially our borrowing and our investments or our savings. As you know, we pursue, for our reserves, we pursue a fairly conservative strategy, which is why our yields on our investments are lower than our borrowing costs. But that's the price of having a balanced approach to borrowing and to keeping reasonable levels of reserves. Most of those reserves are earmarked for specific projects, and we will continue our balanced approach to where we put our money, which is conservative, but not as conservative as it was sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I would say. Taryn, is there anything I've missed there?
Are there any comments, any questions? None from the leadership team. Mo, anything from you? No? Mary-Tras? No? Okay. Please could we agree to approve and adopt this? Well, not for us, sorry. Please could we recommend to the full council that the Treasury Management Strategy mid-year review is approved and adopted? Can we agree that tonight? Thank you. Thank you very much. And if there's no other business, nothing anyone else wants to raise, I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming and good night.
And happy Christmas.